Hello friends, today we is going to discuss what is the difference between Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication. These are the two methods to connect our database. So let's begin to understand what are these methods. The first we going to definition. Window authentication is the default and the more secure method using the credential of the Windows account to connect to SQL Server. It is just use your window account credential to connect your server database server. It is more secure. Second method is SQL server authentication require the creating the username password in the SQL server and authenticate using these credentials. It is less secure than the window authentication and it is involve sending password over the network. uh, the, this is the basic definition of these two methods. In the SQL Server authentication, we simply create a username and password, and we pass this credential to access the database. And in window authentication, simply way it is use your window credential, window login credential to authenticate the user to access the database. And to configure window authentication for the SQL server, you need to select the window authentication mode during the installation of the SQL server database engine. It means when you going to install SQL server on the server location, and during that you can select the window authentication mode to access the SQL server. And if you have already installed the SQL server, you can change the authentication mode at any time using the SQL Server Management Studio. We all know to access the SQL Server database, we simply use the SQL Server Management Studio tools. Through that, we can also change the authentication mode anytime if you already install the SQL Server. So let's see the steps how we change the authentication mode in SQL Server. There is a following step like right click on the object explorer and then select property and then select the security page. On the security page, just select authentication mode, which authentication you required in SQL server, and then OK. And then you have to restart the SQL server to change it to take effected. And this is the here you can see the object explorer. And in object explorer in object explorer, just we have to right click and you can see the property. When you click on the property, the pop-up comes on, and on the pop-up you just open the security page. In security page you can check there is a two mode, window authentication mode and SQL server and window authentication mode. If you select the first radio button, that is enable only window authentication mode. User can access the database through the window authentication mode only. When you select the second radio button, the both mode enable, SQL server authentication and window authentication mode. So there is a simple steps to change authentication mode in SQL server if SQL server already installed on the server locations. If it is not installed, during the installation you can select the window authentication mode in window authentication mode during the installation. So this is the simple steps to change the authentication mode in the SQL server. And in a live scenario, mostly we use the SQL server authentication, and because of the application location and database location are different in a live scenario. Application hosted on the one server and database hosted on the another server. To connect the application to the database, normally we pass the credential like username and password to access the SQL server. So both mode are used, but mostly we use SQL server authentication. And when we going to use SQL server authentication, just we make to sure we access the database through the secure network. That is only we kept in our mind. So I hope you understand what is the difference between that window authentication and SQL Server authentication. And one thing we can see that here, like if you connect, when you connect the SQL Server, normally you see this pop-up window, and here first server name, and there here you can see the two mode. When you select this window authentication mode, it does not ask you credential, ask you to credential to write down the credential here. You can see the disable the username and password type. In when you select the SQL Server authenticator, you just pass the username and the username and the password, then you can connect the database. There's a basically two method. I hope you understand